Tonight on Talking Politics, the producer of the GBH News podcast, The Big Dig, will join me on the massive and infamous highway project that ultimately transformed the city of Boston. But first, it was one of her central promises on the campaign trail to bring down the cost of housing in Massachusetts. And now Governor Maura Healey is launching her first major push to do so since taking office. And it has a major price tag, more than $4 billion.
We'll create more homes than ever before for people with disabilities, for our veterans, for people coming out of homelessness.
If passed, Healey estimates the plan would lead to the production of 40,000 new homes, more than half of which would be for low and middle income households. The bill also includes nearly 30 policy changes, including a statewide zoning law change, a new Office of Fair Housing, and a huge investment in public housing. Joining me to discuss are Kanson-Benanav, the Executive Director of Abundant Housing Massachusetts, Dr. Charles Homer, a member of the strategy team for the Greater Boston Interfaith Organization, and GBH News State House reporter Katie Lannan. Good to see you all, and thanks for being here. So, Jesse, I know that your group, among other things, is especially excited about the governor's provision involving accessory dwelling units. For people who might need to get caught up, what are accessory dwelling units and what does the governor want to do with them?
So accessory dwelling units, or sometimes called granny flats or in-law apartments, are extra units that a homeowner can build on their property, sometimes in the building or in the backyard. What the governor is proposing to do in this bond bill is legalize accessory dwelling units by right, which means without special zoning permits, in every community across the state of Massachusetts.
And tell me if I've got this right. There's a lot of details to keep track of here. I believe she said that could lead to 8,000 units being constructed.
Yeah, I think that's the number that she's estimated. We're hoping that we can get it to even more. I think ADUs are a real important part of the puzzle here to address our extreme housing shortage in Massachusetts.
Why are they an important part?
We need every tool that we can get in the toolkit in order to address the shortage of nearly 200,000 homes, if not more, that we're facing in Massachusetts. We've done really important things like the MBTA Communities Act, which does mandate multifamily zoning near transit, allowing apartment buildings near transit around the Greater Boston area. But that only touches the Boston area, Greater Boston area. We need to make sure that every community across the state is doing what it can do in order to build the homes that current and future Massachusetts residents need. Building backyard or in-law apartments is one important strategy because it allows homeowners to build these units in a way that helps them perhaps generate some income, give homes to family members with a disability.
And a little bit cheaper.
And they're a little bit cheaper to build.
I should mention, just for the record, that as you know, as all of you know, not everyone is thrilled about the accessory dwelling unit provision. I want to roll a statement from the Mass Municipal Association, which came out and said in its write-up of the governor's bill, the Mass Municipal Association is opposed to this potential preemption of local zoning decision-making and will be raising these concerns as the bill makes its way through the legislative process. Katie, we'll get to that with you in a little bit. Charles Homer, my sense is that your organization is excited about a couple other pieces of the governor's bill. What are they?
Yeah, thank you very much. Such a pleasure to be here. Yes, we're very excited about two particular parts of the bill that were done. One was the very substantial investment in addressing the needs of public housing. So Massachusetts is one of only 4 states in the country that has its own state-owned public housing, but unfortunately the state has not invested in that for many, many decades. There are about 43,000 units of public housing. There are over 70,000 elderly, disabled, and young, very low-income families that live in that housing. The condition has deteriorated terribly. I'm a pediatrician by training, and I would not allow, or I would not want any of my children or family members to live in the conditions with mold, with rats, and asbestos and lead running throughout. So she's proposing to invest $1.6 billion over the next 5 years, which is more than 2.5 times what had been in the bond bill 5 years ago.
That's a lot of money.
So that's one component, and again, we're thrilled about that.
And what's the other component?
The other is the real estate transfer fee. It enables local towns or cities that want to implement a tax or a fee on high-end real estate transactions over $1 million, that they could then add a fee between 0.5% and 2% that would go to create to the affordable housing trusts within those communities. That sounds very complicated, but basically additional.
I thought it was pretty straightforward.
It's additional funds that would be available that could be used to build new affordable housing, could also be used for first-time homeowners, can actually also be used to address the needs of public housing in those communities. So it's a great tool that'll provide substantial resources for those communities.
As I did a moment ago, I want to note that people are already voicing opposition to that piece, as well as others. Here's a statement from Greg Vassell, the CEO of the Greater Boston Real Estate Board. He said, "We applaud the Healey-Driscoll administration for taking bold action to address the state's crippling housing crisis, but we have deep concerns about the inclusion of a sales tax on real estate. It's an unstable source of revenue that would cause more harm than good at a time when people and businesses are leaving the state because it is just too expensive." Which brings me to you, Katie Lannan. Where does the legislature sit on the various issues? I'm asking you to generalize about a huge body with a whole bunch of different members, but when it comes to accessory dwelling units, the transfer tax, the investment of money in public housing, is there any sense of where the legislature is on those?
I think, we've seen transfer taxes or fees, whichever term you want to use, is an idea both in terms of the broad local option any community that wants to opt in can, and individual petitions from places like Boston and Wellfleet that have been trying to get them just at the local level within their borders. The legislature's been pretty cool to that. Those bills have been filed for years and they haven't advanced. Well, they've advanced, but they haven't become law.
Yeah.
And ditto as well, accessory dwelling units is something that in some of the suburbs and even cities like Lowell have been having a really contentious fight over trying to pass an ADU ordinance. So I think this is going to be one of the bills where you do see different lawmakers representing different parts of the state having really different feelings. Of course, that's if by the time this bill makes it to a vote in either branch, that those pieces are still in there, right? They could be carved out along the way, more things could be added in, but there's somewhere more than 24 policy proposals in here, so there's going to be a lot for lawmakers to chew on. And then there's a question of if they agree that $4 billion, it's over 5 years, it's not as at once, but if authorizing that much bonding is affordable for the state, there's going to be, I think we're going to see a lot of debate over the next few months.
Okay, and was someone going to hop in? I thought I heard someone beginning to speak, forgive me. What about the public housing piece? Do you expect, and given the caveats that you offer, we'll see if they think $4 billion is affordable, see if they think $1.6 billion is affordable for that, but is public housing and investing in it more politically palatable than some of the other things that we just talked about?
I think it is. I think it's something you haven't heard. You had statements in opposition to a few things. You didn't have a statement in opposition to that.
Yep.
I think that's something that, part of the reason Governor Healey attached policies to a bond bill is because bond bills typically pass. These, reauthorizations are necessary. They're usually pretty popular investments, and that can be a way to kind of get a policy through rather than filing it as standalone legislation.
That makes sense. Jesse, your group and others had backed a big housing bill called an Act to Promote YIMBY, yes, in my backyard. Are there a couple pieces, one or two pieces from that legislation that you would hope the governor would include that she didn't put in there?
Well, I want to say, first of all, I'm grateful that she included our accessory dwelling unit component. What is in the bond bill is reflective of what we had proposed as an organization in that bill. I think there's a broader conversation that we need to have in Massachusetts about the relationship between the powers of zoning that the state gives to municipalities. We heard the quote from the Mass Municipal Association expressing their opposition. One of the things that we're trying to do in the Act to Promote Yes in My Backyard is establish categories related to zoning where the state says what municipalities can and can't do with relation to what we call exclusionary zoning. That's the way that municipalities use zoning to limit certain types of buildings or new homes from being built in their communities, which has the direct impact of limiting the types of people, low-income people, people of color, from accessing their communities.
Families, right, in some
families,
cases.
exactly. Massachusetts, because because of the powers that the state has given to municipalities to make broad decisions around zoning, is now more segregated by race and class today than we were 30 years ago. And that's because organizations like Mass Municipal Association are fighting to protect the power of communities to zone. So looking at zoning processes or permitting processes to allow conversions of commercial buildings to residences. There is a funding program in the bond bill, but we'd like to see that contemplated under zoning. We would like to see a broader mandate to allow at least small apartment buildings, 3-deckers, in more communities around the state, not just in the MBTA region as mandated by the MBTA Communities Act. So those are a couple areas, but at the core, it's about making sure that communities can't use zoning to keep people out.
Charles Homer, let me ask you the same question. Anything that you had hoped the governor would include that she didn't?
Again, just as Jesse said, we're thrilled with the bill. We think it covers a lot. It's a great bill and has a lot of wonderful things, the public housing, the real estate transfer fee. We have another element of our housing justice campaign that addresses housing for individuals who are returning into society after incarceration. We call them returning citizens. We think that these individuals will benefit from getting IDs from the Registry of Motor Vehicles before they actually leave incarceration. And we also would like to see those individuals getting priority alongside others for a variety of state public housing programs, including housing vouchers. So those are two bills that we'd love to see added on, as you already indicated, to this bill to pass. Those two elements, by providing housing to people leaving incarceration, we believe in Justice for Housing, which is a group that we work with, also believes will decrease the risk of recidivism of people committing additional crimes and returning to prison. So that's why we think it's so important. That really was the only other part of our agenda.
So you guys did pretty well.
We're very supportive of an element which Jesse also mentioned, which was the implementation of the previously passed MBTA Community Act, and many of our religious organizations around the Greater Boston area are working very hard in their cities and towns to implement that, again, to address this issue of restrictive zoning.
Katie, how quickly is the legislature likely to create an analogous bill of their own? What's the timetable here? The governor sees this as, she didn't use the term state of emergency, she says it's the most important challenge facing Massachusetts. How quickly is the legislature going to move?
So that's always a guessing game, right?
Yep.
So I think it's really important to note that the legislature is breaking for their next kind of recess, not a strict recess, but their last day of formal sessions for the year is November 15th. So that'd be a lot to get done, in the next couple of weeks. The governor is pointing to the spring construction season as kind of an ideal time frame. Of course, these major pieces of legislation are the ones that often take the longest for the two branches in particular, let alone within the branches, to find consensus on. So I think you're probably looking at more of a summertime, rush to the finish line, July 31st. But I could always be surprised.
I guess that possibility is there, but given what I know, I don't know as much about the legislature as you do. That sounds like a pretty good prediction. Katie Lannan, Jesse Kanson-Benanav, and Charles Homer, thank you all for talking this through.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, more than 15 years since construction finally wrapped up, the Big Dig is still notorious for delays and cost overruns and for taking way longer and costing way more than anyone had planned. But as Ian Koss explores in his GBH podcast named after the infamous project, the results of the Big Dig are a different story.
1, 2, 3, go. Yeah!
It was a long time, but the results are spectacular.
I mean, it is absolutely beautiful around here now.
Do you think it was worth it?
Yes, most definitely.
So is it time to jettison that old narrative? And what might the Big Dig tell us about future ambitious infrastructure projects? Ian Koss joins me now. Thanks for coming in, and congratulations on the success of this podcast. I know it hit #1 on the Apple podcast charts, correct?
The history charts.
History charts, thank you. And there's some other impressive numbers attached, but there's a real appetite for this.
Apparently, all these years later, people in Boston and elsewhere
I don't know. Still want to hear about the big dig.
I want to know what made you think that was going to be the case, because I assume you thought there was going to be an audience when you embarked on this. I will confess, when I heard that GBH was involved with the Big Dig podcast, I thought, oh, so much has already been written and said about that. And, what can we do new here that people will want to consume? And obviously, you did a whole bunch. How did you know there was an appetite?
Well, for me, I mean, there was so much written and said about this project at the time. But then I think there's been, I don't want to say a silence, but a bit of a void since then. You know, there were a few books that came out around the time when the project was wrapping up, but there really hadn't been anyone who took a look at the whole scope of the project with some distance, with some perspective, with the knowledge of, you know, not just how it came to be, but how it played out in the long term. And it just felt like it was a good time to do that, not only because of, you know, the distance we now have from that story, but the relevance that story has to our present moment. You know, Biden's infrastructure bill, all the pressure around, you know, renewable energy and improving our transit system. It just felt like now was a time to revisit that story.
I want to get back to the relevance piece and what your takeaway ultimately is when it comes to whether we can do this sort of thing again in the future. But some viewers will know that there's a ton of engineering detail in here, because it's a very complicated engineering story. But there's also just a ton of political content, because it's a deeply political story involving a number of different actors.
It's Boston.
It's Boston, and I want to roll just a little bit from episode 4, where you point out that the reality as the Big Dig started brewing here in Massachusetts was not the reality of today's Massachusetts. Let's take a look.
Great.
If you think of Massachusetts as a high-income state or as a hub for biotech firms and startups, then I'm here to tell you, the state you're thinking of is a relatively new phenomenon. In the mid-1970s, our unemployment rate was 12%, the highest of any industrial state. By 1988, it was 3%, the lowest of any industrial state. That turnaround came to be known as the Massachusetts Miracle.
His fellow governors voted him the most effective governor in America.
Dukakis presided over most of this remarkable period. He was elected governor in 1974, again in 1982, and again in 86. Then he rode the glow of the miracle all the way through the presidential primaries in 1988.
He wiped out huge budget deficits and led an economic turnaround they call a miracle.
I love the back-to-back shot of him jogging and then hopping on the tee. That's the episode where, if I remember right, you say the idea that there are clear good guys and bad guys in this story starts to break down.
Yes.
How so?
I think, so the origins of this story, of the Big Dig, are really in activism, citizen activism, right? The idea of tearing down the central artery, this hulking elevated highway. And so much of the political momentum behind it came from local people and neighborhoods pushing back against highways, right? So that's kind of one current, right, that's flowing into making this project happen. Then you fast forward a few years, the project has gotten federal funding, right? It's no longer the scrappy underdog. Now it's, as one of the project's architects described it, now we're the kid walking onto the playground with a $5 bill hanging out of our back pocket, and everybody wants something, right? So there's this interesting moment, at least very interesting for me, in the late 1980s, when the politics around the project really shift, and you start having a lot of local opposition to the project. Some environmental groups, some neighborhood groups, some property owners who are upset about how it'll impact their property. And so what had been this sort of, like I said, underdog story, the whole city rallying around this unlikely project.
Let's make the built environment better.
Right. Turns into something a lot more complicated, and there's all this sort of internal struggles within the city.
You just mentioned that the sort of original impetus for this comes from citizen activists who are trying to make Boston more livable, and it involves opposition to another big project.
Right.
Again, I want to roll a little bit of audio and video involving that Genesis period, and then we'll come back and talk more about it. Let's take another look.
By January of 1969, when Francis Sargent took his oath as governor, the GBC protesters were ready.
About 2,000 folks show up in front of the State House saying, "What are you going to do about this road? What are you going to do about this, Sargent?"
What had started as a small group of Cambridge residents pushing back against a single road had grown into a radical challenge to the state's entire road-building policy. And this was the coming out party for the movement. All the players, all the factions gathered in one place.
It spilled down the stairs of the State House over into Boston Common.
The fire department came, people from every neighborhood in Boston.
Anstey Benfield led a march over from Cambridge and addressed the crowd.
Hello, an area of 15,000 residents. This road will go right through the middle of it.
So we see in that clip the Stop I-95 graffiti.
Yeah.
Obviously, I-95 was not stopped, but it is not now what it was going to be. For people who don't know the history, what was it going to be?
Yeah. So I love this. If you look at a map of Interstate 95, right, it runs from Florida to Maine, and if you zoom in, it goes through basically every big city on the East Coast, right? It goes through D.C., it goes through Baltimore, it goes through New York City. It does not go through Boston, right? If you look at the map, there's this squiggle, and it goes around Boston and then keeps going on the other side. And that's because of that, protest we just saw. It's because of that activism. It was supposed to go through Jamaica Plain, through Roxbury, through the South End.
Then Cambridge, right?
Yeah, then it would link up with this road called the Inner Belt that would cut through Cambridgeport, Central Square, Charlestown, and then continue on the other side. So it would have, just cut a huge slice through the middle of the city.
One of my favorite parts in terms of what I've heard so far of the podcast, what I've seen, is you talking about the disparate groups of people from those neighborhoods who got together to make that not happen. And there's some really fascinating footage. You and I were talking before this segment started. I was saying I didn't really cover anything Big Dig related until the very end. But I did cover Chuck Turner during his time on the city council. And for people who know Chuck Turner and are interested in Boston city politics, there's some remarkable footage of Chuck Turner leading opposition to that I-95 plan.
And I think just to add one bit, that's so important to remember, this movement, the anti-highway movement, is happening in 1969, 70, 71. This is just a few years before the busing crisis, right, which I know WGBH has been doing a lot on as we mark the 50th anniversary of that period, right? And so just imagine that you have, in that moment, activists from Roxbury, activists from, largely white suburbs, coming together to fight against these highways together. Activists from East Boston, activists from Cambridge, right on the eve of what will become this incredibly divisive
just
period.
A few years later. That's really, I hadn't thought of that. That's a terrific point. Do you think that this story that you tell here reflects dynamics that are unique to Massachusetts, or could you imagine a similar project playing out over a few decades in a similar way in another American city?
Yes and no. I mean, I think the basic kind of pieces are there in many cities, right? Many cities have big elevated highways that, destroy neighborhoods. And many cities would have and would still like to put those, remove those highways. I think one of the pieces that you cannot ignore that makes Massachusetts and Boston different and makes this project happen is the sheer amount of political power concentrated in this state at that time. So in the 1980s, I mean, there's this incredible constellation of Tip O'Neill, right? Speaker of the House. He's been in Congress for 30 years. He's risen to its highest post, right? You've got Senator Ted Kennedy, scion of this legendary American political family. You've got Michael Dukakis, who I think people today might remember as the guy who lost the presidential election, but before that, he was an incredibly popular and well-known governor, right? So you've got so much, political power on the local and federal level that's pushing to make this project happen. And I don't know that any other state could have wielded or pulled together that much power.
You remind people in the podcast that President Reagan vetoed this, right? And yet it became a reality anyway.
Exactly, exactly. And I think a telling counterexample is that New York City actually had its own version of the Big Dig, a similar kind of project that was called Westway, that would have put much of the West Side Highway underground. Again, similar impetus, similar vision, similar challenges. That project died in Congress, essentially, in the 1980s.
So I know the big overarching question that you float in this series is whether the United States is still capable of doing big, ambitious projects of the sort that the Big Dig was.
Yeah.
I don't want to get you to make people not listen to it, but what's your takeaway? What did you end up deciding the answer is?
I mean, it's not a yes or no answer, and we spent 9 episodes trying to tease that question apart and understand all the complexities of it. So I think what I came away feeling, though, from this story is that the Big Dig captures so many of the challenges, so many of the reasons why big visionary projects don't happen, or why they're over budget, why they're behind schedule. And those reasons are not unique to the Big Dig, right? It's not, my reading of the history is not that this was just one greedy contractor or one corrupt politician that spoiled the whole thing. My reading of the history is that these were systemic forces that at every step of the way hindered and blocked this project as it attempted to make its way to completion. So looking at that history, it is kind of daunting, right? To imagine it undertaking ambitious projects like this today. But I think it also provides some real cause for optimism in that it did happen, right? Despite all the flaws, despite all the delays, it did happen. And I think there's a real inspiration to be taken from the way this idea, this vision was sort of handed like a baton, from one administration to the next, one leader to the next.
Sometimes from enemy to enemy.
Sometimes from enemy to enemy, exactly. And it did endure, it did survive, and it did transform the city. And I don't mean to say that there are no critiques to be made of the project or how it was executed, but in my view, is undeniably transformative.
Ian Koss, congratulations again on what is a fascinating project, and thanks for talking with me about it.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
That's it for tonight, but do come back next week, and please tell us what you think. The email's talkingpolitics@wgbh.org. The website is gbhnews.org/talkingpolitics. And while you're at it, sign up for our politics newsletter. For now, thanks for watching, and good night.